Hey there YouTube, I'm Yukitsu, this is the Yukitsu Times, welcome to my channel, welcome to more Rome 2 Total War, and welcome to a little bit of a talk that we're going to be having. It's going to be a little bit about balance here, and we're basically going to be talking about this because there's a patch coming out relatively soon. It's going to be sort of changing things up a little bit. Actually, this is a foggy day, so let's go for a different army here. The reason I'm doing this is because missile units get utterly shot on in foggy days, so we're going to have to switch. I'm not overly concerned what he takes, so I'm not going to worry about that. And, well, actually, archers work just as well in fog, so let's go ahead and do that. But the reason we're talking about this is that there's a patch coming through the tubes relatively soon that's going to be about adjusting some of the units. It's going to change the way heavy infantry works a little bit, and it's going to target sword units a little bit more, so they don't kill units quite as quickly, they don't kill them quite as effectively. And basically it's going to sort of be an all-around balance patch that's going to be designed towards taking down those kinds of heavy infantry spam armies that just sort of spam Praetorian Guard, for example. I don't need these guys against a Spartan player, so let's go ahead and do that. Okay. Now, ranged units are incredibly weak in general, but unfortunately Spartans tend to just spam a ton of Royal Pikemen. Spartan pikemen and hide behind that wall of pikes, so it's really awfully annoying if you don't have quite a lot of shooting to deal with it and break that pike line. They can sort of game that by doing something different, but anyway, let's get into the battle. Talking about topic, though, what we're going to probably find is they're going to put the patch through and people are going to stop spamming swords to a small degree, but they'll find a new broken unit to latch onto, and I'm going to just let this finish loading before I keep talking here. Okay, so we're in the game here. Basically what I'm saying is that it's not in the nature of people to suddenly learn to be a mixed, balanced, better player when a patch hits. It's more in their nature to figure out a new way to cheese the game than it is for them to adapt into a more flexible player. They're simply going to find a new broken unit. They're going to stick to it, and they're going to learn how to use that in a spam army. And people who are frustrated with the heavy infantry, like the Praetorian Guard and the Oathsworn and all that other stuff right now, are going to be frustrated by those sorts of units later. It's just going to be a different unit, and there's not really a whole lot that they can do about that. There's simply always going to be broken units out there, and there's always going to be some units that are a little bit stronger for their cost than they should be. Then people are going to simply load up on those and roll over inexperienced players who aren't accustomed to that sort of thing or who don't want to adapt to that. So what you as a player should expect is that you're going to be up against cheese armies after this patch. It may be a different face, it may be a different type of cheese army, but it'll still be a cheese army, and you're going to have to realize that, hey, maybe I can, maybe I'm never going to be in a situation where people don't spam. And that is the situation that you're going to find yourself in. You're going to find that people rarely learn to take balanced armies if they're a spammer. They're going to simply say, well, that one's gone, but this new one's arisen, so I'll just do that and get easy wins, and that'll be the end of that. And the people who think that the game should be perfectly balanced are never going to be happy. But what they don't realize is that the game, as it functions currently, already is very strong for people who take balanced armies. And that's simply because people who take a balanced army have all those options to shut down and counter their opponents, to target their weaknesses, to sort of pick apart at an enemy that's lacking something. And that's how you sort of win when your opponent is missing an element and when they can't fight back in a certain realm. So what I'm saying is that, yeah, people are going to be spammy, like my opponent here who has an all-royal Spartan army here. But the thing is that, those spammy armies aren't necessarily going to be very effective. They're not going to necessarily win. And certainly in this case, he's going to have some issues on account of Spartan units. Royal Spartans for some reason aren't actually as good as you would really think. It's actually those Spartan pikemen that I think are a little bit better, but he's still got enough mass here that he might be able to do quite a bit of damage to me. Anyway, it's just clear out some space here. Now, since I'm talking about this in terms of this problem, I think I should maybe try and talk about a bit about, what's a potential solution. And the solution comes from you, the players. It doesn't come from the CA team. The solution to people spamming is knowing that they'll do it, and knowing that they'll do it no matter how they adjust the armies. They will always find something that they can do to spam. There will never be a point where they're not doing that. What you need to realize is that you could play the game differently, such that, hey, my opponent is spamming me. What can I do about it? And then, what can I do to maneuver around it? What can I do to outplay him? And it's that question of, now outplaying him, as opposed to what it was before, where it's saying, well, this is broken, get CA to nerf it. You don't want to be the guy who's saying, CA, nerf this, please, nerf it, it's broken. The reason being that you'll basically be a bad player if you do that. And it's not to say that, you can't win games or whatever. It's that you'll never learn to become better at the game. You'll never figure out that you can sort of beat these guys, that you can outmaneuver them pretty badly, that you can freeze the game completely and have it lock up so that you can't do anything. But what I'm trying to say is that, these armies currently in their state they are in are beatable. You can very easily defeat this type of army. It's simply a case of it being much simpler on the side that does spam. And here my opponent, realizing that he's missing crucial parts of his thing, has left the game because he realizes I'm going to kite him. So we're just going to head back into quick battle here and keep talking. Now, the way that CA has developed this game is that strategy generally can beat army composition. And the thing is, the number of strategies you can pull out of your box when you've spammed your forces of a single unit type, or even 2 unit types, is very limited. You can only do a few things. But when you've got a well-rounded army, you can do virtually any strategy. Simply, the problem is that people don't realize that when I say they can do any strategy, I don't mean they can use those strategies against any army. If my opponent, for example, is very much a melee-heavy Roman army, he's spammed those melee infantry troops, and I've taken a well-balanced, say, Pontic force, obviously melee rushing him is out of the question. That should not be on my table of strategies. It's not that I don't have that option with the force that's well-balanced. If my opponent, for example, was a Parthian player and has taken all missile units, I could still move up my forces and try and rush into him then. The problem comes from when, I'm using the wrong strategy against that opponent. I have to be able to realize that my strategy works with certain army compositions and against certain army compositions. So it's that combination of things rather than that simple single thing that makes my force effective. So in this particular case, for example, I'm against a Parthian force, and these guys tend to be fairly effective against me, so I'm going to take the Pontic force that I tend to take. Going to get rid of these horse archers because they're not necessarily all that good against a Parthian player, and I'm going to get more of these Eastern archers as compensation for that, and I'm going to need a little bit less pikes since he won't present a strong infantry line front. And I can probably afford actually to get, a couple of these actually I thought I had shock cavalry. Oh, there they are. Yeah. So one of these and then one of these, and that's a perfectly fine setup for me to have here. So, oh, he's switched over to, well, whatever. Okay. Undoing changes is blah, blah, blah. But anyway, talking away here, what my opponent can do and can't do at any given time, I think is sort of heavily dictated not just by which units are strong, which are weak, but by the overall composition of his army and where each of those units fits into the composition of his army. And I think a lot of people don't sort of grasp that fully. They sort of think that, a certain unit is strong, so it's strong at everything, and I can take nothing but that unit and be perfectly fine. But the reality is most of them are strong at a specific niche role. And let's wait till this loads again. Okay, So, for example, in this game, my Bronze Shield Pikemen, they're a fairly strong unit, but I know that they're not as good as his Macedonian Pikemen. And what a lot of people are going to sort of take from that is that, well, I can't use my Bronze Shield Pikemen to front up beat his pikes, and that's correct. That is absolutely something I cannot afford to try and do. But at the same time, that is exactly what a lot of people will try to do, is that they will try and direct head-on engage units that they know in retrospect will absolutely beat them. And I think that's just sort of the way that we're programmed to function, is that we see our unit, and we see our unit in a way where we think, okay, well, it's supposed to function like this, so I will use it like this. We don't think of it in terms of, that's how our unit should work, but it doesn't work against that unit, and I think that's sort of what's throwing people off. And I think that's what's sort of causing these balance problems, is people don't realize or appreciate that, your role has to change for your different units when you're up against different factions and when you're against different units. So, it varies a lot. There's a lot of variation in this game based on what you're up against. You can't simply use Macedonian pike phalanxes, for example, the same way against an Iceni player as you would against, say, a Carthaginian player necessarily, because that Iceni player has a much stronger ability to get around your flanks and swarm it with infantry and use that numerical advantage to try and get at you. Okay, so we're lagging out a little bit here, but we're not going to worry too much about that. Opponent's got Teltests. So anyway, as you can see, our opponent here, he's got a huge line of really strong pikemen, just like I have. I've got some field artillery as well, which is going to give me a little bit of an advantage. But for the most part, we've got fairly similar concept of army here. And that's perfectly fine by me. Now, the thing about this patch that they're going to put through here is that I don't really think that it's going to ultimately change much. And I've said this before, and I'm going to just keep saying it to hammer that point home here, is that, you need to realize that patches change what is at the top. They don't change the fact that there is a top. And I think sort of adapting to that idea is going to be something that people have difficulty with, but I think it's also going to be sort of necessary for people to get that idea to sort of continue advancing and playing better at this game and making this game all that it can really be. And once you've sort of got that down, I think that it's very much possible for you to start beating these armies that you've previously thought were unbeatable. Okay, so our artillery is setting up to fire here. And should leave a bit of an impression. Huh, that was pretty much a whiff. Awful, 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 awful. Wait, those are Thessalian... Oh, he's got Aspis, okay. Yeah, that's better. But anyway, what people I think are trying to look for is the ability to sort of use their armies in a very simplistic, straightforward manner. And I don't really blame them for that, but I think the problem is that they think that that sort of simplistic way is going to always work for them, or that should always work for them, and that their opponent should be doing the same thing, and that their wins should be based on, how they use a similar army composition. Army selection is a major part of this, and then adapting your strategy to your army selection counter to his is a major part of this game. Both of those things in tandem, I think, need to be strongly considered. And the problem, I think, is that a lot of people have with that is that, it's hard. You don't necessarily want to be able to change your plans on the fly like that. It's a very difficult thing to do. And a lot of people, simply put, don't do it. So what I think is going to happen with this next patch is that people are going to complain that the game's broken, that there are balance problems, and that there are serious balance problems with this game. And the patch will do nothing to fix that. So I think what people need to sort of do is get into a scenario or get into the mindset that the game will never be balanced in the way that they want it to be. And once I think they've done that, they will be a lot better at this game, because they'll sort of you'll sort of come to the conclusion that okay, well, these units are stronger, but I can beat them with sound strategy. Or, these units are broken, but I can beat them with my counter unit. And, you know, continue on using your stuff intelligently here. And freezing up again, because I think maybe my opponent is also quitting. But whatever. It could actually be my end at this point. I don't really know here. Yep, no idea what's going on today. Doesn't look like it's my end, since I can still select things. That usually means that it's my opponent that's gone and frozen or disconnected, but we'll have to see in a minute. Okay, yeah, my opponent left the game. A lot of opponents leaving the game today. And that's probably because he didn't have the tools to deal with what I had. He had Peltas, which are a good unit, but they don't really solve the problem. But yeah, not really satisfactory battles to be talking about here in terms of that. But, I think that it's worth saying that this patch, be careful, because they're going to do it. People are going to let their guard down and say, the game is balanced now, I can beat these sword units with my whatever. And then they're going to get hit by, let's say the next broken thing is Egypt, using all Hellenic Royal Guard, which is an army that I've actually seen before. And you know what people are going to do is they're going to say Hellenic Royal Guard are broken. They're not going to figure out how way to beat it. And that's sort of the tragedy of this situation, is that they're going to look at this and decry it as broken and that the Hellenic Royal Guard needs to be nerfed. They're not going to figure out ways to get around this unit. They're not going to figure out ways to circumnavigate these units or cause the battle to form into that sort of chaos that disfavors pike units. They're not going to figure out that this army has a lot of weaknesses that's lacking even more in mobility than the Roman one. So what people are going to do is complain that this unit is broken, and people are going to jump on that bandwagon. And that's going to become the perception of it, and that's going to sort of multiply the number of people who are spamming that unit and marching that across the field in pike formation. And what this is going to result in is that they're just going to nerf them, and a new unit is going to come up as the dominant unit. And this is going to continue on pretty much ad infinitum until, eventually people get good enough at the game that they can counter any sort of spam with a versatile, flexible army. And that's sort of what happened in Shogun. There were nerfs that reduced the efficacy of certain units, and they often hit them so hard that they fell out of the game entirely, or to such a large degree that they stopped making any relevant contribution to it. And what happened after that was immediately a new unit type would get spammed. For example, early on, Ashigaru were so cost effective that people brought all Ashigaru armies. In fact, I did that because the retainers that did that made it so easy to do and so powerful. Guns after that were so powerful because they could route entire melee spams virtually instantly. And when they got nerfed, sword armies became the dominant spam because the way gun mechanics worked, you couldn't stop a melee infantry charge anymore. And it took a long time before people started to realize, okay, well, each of these units and each of these strategies has a counter. So if my army has a little bit of everything, I can beat any type of army. And, when the heavy gun came out as well, that was another interesting thing because that indirectly nerfed a lot of sword rush armies because suddenly those people who were taking all sword rush armies and just balling through the center of an enemy opponent would run into this line of guns and have their entire army wiped out in one volley. It was brutal. But you know what? Intelligent players figured out how to beat those before that unit was nerfed. Intelligent players figured out how to beat sword spam before the guns were brought back into line with what they should be, which is to say they had a morale penalty for friendly fire for their own units, but they still didn't instantly shatter their entire own army like they did after the nerf to them did. So what you ended up with was the situation where the good players were still using balanced armies, and they were still beating these imbalanced armies, and they were doing it before the patch. And those were the players that would continue winning after the patch, even though new cheese would arise. And I think that the same thing can be said for this game. There will be cycles of cheese, there will be cycles of units being in vogue and in power, and unstoppable by certain army compositions, and that they will also have their own counters that a balanced army could manage. And this is going to continue pretty much for forever until people get good enough at the game that they can run a balanced army to defeat a spam army. Anyway, that's my insight on the balance of this game and the way that this game is going to work, and why I don't think you should get your hopes up for this balance patch or any balance patch. The only way to counter spam is to get better. It is not to get them to nerf units. And I think the sooner you realize that, the sooner you're going to have fun with this game, the sooner you're going to do well in multiplayer quick battle, because those things will always be out there. And it is up to you to figure out the weakness of it and to exploit that weakness and defeat that army. Because it's always there. That weakness is always there. And once you figure it out, it's so much easier. The game is so much clearer and it's so much more fun to play it. Because you'll be beating those people who spam. And when you encounter a well-balanced army, it is just a much more pleasant experience when you also have a well-balanced army to play against that person. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the matter. I hope you found it all insightful. And of course, I hope to see you all next time.